Welcome to the Yang Gang Roundtable, an ongoing conversation on poverty, basic income, and electoral politics. I'm here with Angelo, Disdonn, Faye, Jacqueline, Jeremy, and Sheridan, and we are having an open discussion on those topics and relevant news topics that are happening right now that relate to them, and our own lives that in ways that relate to them. So, sorry for interrupting, Jacqueline. Please, could you give a context for what you're talking about and then resume talking about it?
Well, we were talking about everything from the guy where I live getting admitted to the local ER for giving himself a UV light probe enema in following President Trump.
Wait, a UV enema?
Well, he shoved a light probe up his butt and couldn't get it out.
Wow.
So what does that have to do with basic income, electoral politics, and poverty?
Okay,
you could afford a textbook on anatomy.
Well, and then Jeremy and I were kind of talking about, how the mishandling of the whole thing. And I was talking about what I was working on for the past 2 weeks of trying to get the lawmakers in my state, as well as I reached out to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to let them know that Congress's response to helping the poorest of the poor who are on food stamps, who have no income at all, but they have food stamps to buy food, how their idea of help was to just increase their food stamp award. But as what I've experienced myself as somebody who is disabled, poor, living in a rural area, no car, you can't use your food stamps to buy food during this crisis because, a lot of the stores are only allowing people to do curbside pickup. But yet the curbside pickup services, you have to first order your food online, pay for it in advance, and those platforms do not allow you to use your EBT card. So you can't do curbside pickup, and you can't use your EBT card for Fresh Direct or Instacart or even Amazon in most states. So what we're looking at here, and this is what I've been working on all week, is a colossal problem of, some of the most vulnerable people literally being left to starve because of not being able to use the food stamps that our government, quote unquote, helped them with. And yesterday, we were able to get, our grandson, who is the only one in our family that has a car, and he's helping his mom who doesn't have a car, his sister who's a single mother who doesn't have a car, and, around that, me and my husband who don't have a car anymore, to try to just get to medical appointments, get to the supermarket. And for us to get to the supermarket, with me being immune compromised as a diabetic and over age 50, there's only 4 hours, a 4-hour window in the entire week that is semi-safe for me to go into the store to use the food stamps I have left over on my card before we actually lost our food stamps that I wasn't able to spend on food. And those are 2 hours, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning, and 2 hours again, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Thursday morning. Those are the only hours at 2 stores that are available. And I have to go in person to use the food stamps. So, there's people who are even worse off than us that didn't even get a COVID check, who have food stamps on their EBT cards that they're unable to use. They, are unable to buy food because these other platforms will not accept the EBT card, and yet they can't get into the stores either because you're rural poor and don't have a car, you're immune compromised and you can't go into the stores, and you don't have a car. And it's just a nightmare. Or the stores have decided to take it on their own authority to exclude in-store shopping altogether and do just curbside pickups or delivery, which, again, don't accept the EBT card. So, there was a whole lot of money spent in response to this corona thing to supposedly help the least of these by increasing food stamp benefit amounts temporarily. But that's money that was not well spent. It was wasted because if you cannot use the food stamps to buy the food, it's rather pointless, isn't it?
When there's no one to trade with.
Yeah. So I mean, and it's an issue that I've been trying to get signal boosted because it's a significant problem that isn't getting the attention that it should. And if anything is a glaringly obvious case for why we need UBI, and we need to look at how unhelpful a lot of these so-called helpful means-tested programs really are, this is it. This is it. And you've got the whole issue where, and Jeremy and I were talking about this, of, the push to, force people to go back to work, which is actually being raised, I think, to derail and thwart our attempts to get a UBI implemented, even on a temporary level, because, they know that once the UBI camel puts its nose in the tent, the whole camel's going to follow and we're going to have UBI permanently. And they don't want that. Yeah.
I completely agree, Jacqueline.
I agree too. And the thing is that they realize just how bad off we are right now. It's like they fucking know, but they don't realize that asking people to reopen is just going to skyrocket our death count and make everything so much worse.
It's going to be a replay of the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 and 1919, except it'll be worse by an order of magnitude. Because COVID is probably, from what I've read about it and researched about it, COVID is a lot more deadly than the H1N1.
Yeah.
And
I think the Spanish flu was like 3 to 5%, and this is like 5 to 10% fatality rate.
Yeah. And as is already, we've got hospitals being overwhelmed. I mean, come on, they are hauling out corpses of COVID victims and putting them in refrigerated trucks. Sooner and faster than area funeral homes can pick up a maximum of 3 to 5 bodies, per trip. It's like all of the mechanisms that we have in place for processing the dead are taxed to the limit. And if anybody was really paying attention, the same thing happened in China, where even though their official media arm was like not allowed to really, talk about this, people in the trading community found this out when they were looking at the number of casket makers and crematorium parts makers that were being deluged with orders from crematoriums in China, because of the body count just by sheer numbers was taxing the resources that they had available to deal with this. And if we get a second wave, people are complaining about their stock portfolios being in the toilet now. That's nothing. That's nothing. And that's why I was a little irritated with Zoltan Isvan. Because I don't think he really understood, if he thinks the economy is bad right now with the lockdowns, that's nothing what's going to happen if we get a second wave of this shit. And that's why UBI is necessary. And this whole idea of, forcing people to go back to work, what we should be doing is encouraging and promoting as much automation as possible and getting UBI into everybody's hands yesterday. Not food stamp benefit raises, not these garbage means testing programs that end up excluding more needy people than they help. Not food stamps that you can't use because you can't go to the store, but yet you can't use your food stamps to buy your groceries through Instacart or Fresh Direct or even through the store's own curbside express services. We need UBI, period. That's what we need. And we need to not, Congress needs to understand that they cannot dilly-dally about this.
Well, tell them to get their asses back to work because they're on vacation again.
I literally called my representatives saying that exact same thing like a day or two ago, because it's just absurd that they're extending their paid vacation again.
I have called my reps once to twice a week and written letters to them once or twice a week, every week since this shit started, telling them, yo, UBI, get your ass back to work. UBI. Oh, by the way, bail out the fucking postal system so we don't fucking have any problems getting our shit.
Hi, Disdonn. I've never actually had a podcast with you before. My name is Faye.
Hi, Faye.
What is that your name, Disdonn?
It's the alias I'm using for purposes of anonymity.
I see. Okay.
I live in Trumpville, Montana. I don't think we did the introductions yet. Shael just turned on the bot.
Okay, well, I'd love to
we did not
get some introductions because I've never actually met one of the people that we're talking with today.
That sounds good. Why don't we start with you, Angelo? Is Angelo here? Has Angelo stepped away? All right, Ariel.
Yeah, sure. What's up?
All right, good. I thought I was just on strike 2 there. Okay, so if you would please.
What, my Twitter handle?
Yeah, just say I'm Ariel. My
Ariel.
Twitter is Ariel's Armada.
Oh yeah, I'm Ariel. My Twitter is Ariel's_Armada.
And if
and
you,
you can find me on YouTube.
Yeah.
Revolutionary Thinking.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you the whole time, but yeah.
Yeah.
Disdonn.
Okay.
I'm Disdonn. You can find me on Twitter at Disdonn Plays. It's DISDONN Plays. And I'm a Twitch streamer, speedrunner, and charity organizer.
There you go. There's the Disdonn elevator pitch, Faye. What do you think?
Wow, that's cool. Where do you live, Disdonn?
Trumpville, Montana.
Awesome.
Originally from Minnesota, but my wife got a teaching job out here, so we moved.
Okay, and your wife teaches. That's awesome. My name is Faye, and you can find me at Palestine Faye. Whoops, Palestine Math. So I live in East Texas, and would you say that your area is a bit rural out there, Disdonn?
I live in a town of about 150 people, and the town that has the grocery store has about 500 people. So yeah, very, very rural.
It's an even smaller town than mine. My town probably has, I would say, maybe 19,000 people. Mm-hmm.
Jacqueline, should we introduce you?
Yeah, I'm Jacqueline Homan, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jacqueline Homan. And you can follow me on my Patreon, 99 Reasons Why. And I get all over like horse shit, writing and activating for UBI. So I write all over the place. Twitter, Facebook, Quora, Medium, everywhere.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
No, you answer questions on Quora.
Oh yeah, when they're not questions that are really, shall we say, tax my emotional capital limit. Like questions that are not, disingenuous.
That's cool. I remember the 10-hour Q&A from Andrew Yang.
So we introduce you now, Jeremy.
Hi, this is Jeremy. You may not hear me much during this podcast, but I will be working behind the scenes. If you want to tune in and see what I am doing, you can find our live stream at twitch.tv/Yang Roundtable. And if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, you can find me at Jeremy Sammons1, and that's SAMMONS and the number 1.
Thank you. Jeremy's our assistant producer. He's keeping our Twitch stream going and, just like he said, helping out with some technical and research stuff. And thank you, Jeremy. And Sheridan.
Thank you, Shael. I'm Sheridan. I'm a small business manager here in New Mexico, and I'm very happy to be discussing UBI today on May Day, the general strike across the nation.
Oh, thank you so much for reminding me. It slipped my mind, and I had made a point of it to talk about the general strike. I'm sure we will, but I'm glad you reminded me.
You're very welcome, Shael.
Thank you. And I, as Sheridan said, am Shael. I'm the producer of this show. You can find me on Twitter at ShaelRiley. Thank you, Faye. Thank you for reminding me to do the introduction. So, where were we?
Well, anyway, we were talking about the UBI's better than the means tested thing. If you look on the right in the chat, you can see the letter I sent to Steve Scalise. Feel free to read it.
Oh, yes. Steve Scalise has been denouncing Nancy Pelosi's timid consideration of a minimum guaranteed annual income. And he claimed it as a overreach of the Democratic Party to push socialistic ideology during a crisis. To which I would say... He is a Republican senator, I believe. But I would immediately rebut that with, yes, but you're actively encouraging people to get back to work during a crisis.
I called him Numbskulise. So that's just me.
That's a really good nickname. So I wanted to mention that before we go straight into it, that when I was listening to Jeremy say that we weren't going to hear from him very much during this thing, I was like, darn it, he has the best radio voice ever. I wish I could hear more of his voice.
All right, well, for you, Faye, I will try to chime in every.
Thank you. So I put up the link to that general strike. You see that home general strike? If you click on that, you can find out how you can support the general strike and what it's about and what the history is for people who might be interested in participating. I guess, I don't know, people can't really click on the link in the Twitch stream, but there it is. There's the general strike page. And then right below that, I put the UBI Center, .org/COVID-19, and that takes you to a wonderful page that tracks all the different emergency cash transfer proposals during this COVID-19 crisis, as relief.
Those are incredible resources. I didn't even know about the Consolidated UBI Center. Thank you so much, Faye.
Yeah,
this is really cool because when you look down this list, it shows you what party the people come from, and you will see Democrat, and then you will see Republican, and then you will see Democrat, and then you'll see Republican again, which is really exciting. I mean, I can't think of a more unifying, policy than this one.
It's like was it Paget had just had that talk with that Trumper for Yang guy, and that Trumper for Yang said that he'd vote for Biden if Biden considered a UBI, and Paget would vote for Trump. No, either one said they'd vote for the other party if that other party would implement a UBI. So it's like they've stopped caring about like that. That's like their laser focused number one target, and nothing else matters. So that's a really good sign.
If I could nutshell the general strike for our podcasting audience, it is essentially on May 1st today. Don't buy anything. Don't go do any labor. Don't engage in the economy. Essentially,
right.
Very typical day for me.
So there was one proposal on that UBI Center I really wanted to bring up, and it was by Joe Kennedy. It's actually. This is the first time I've seen it, and it says $4,000 a month, or $4,000 per adult. I was wondering if any of you had...
I love that because that means that, we have someone proposing to go farther than everybody else, and that means, it's again shifting the center. The median proposal is no longer, less than $2,000.
Yeah, it means now at some point it's possible some of those people who balked at $1,000 a month will go, oh no, please, we'll bargain down to $2,000 a month because we don't want to give you $4,000. So it is a very good sign that we're playing that kind of hardball.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
if
looking at the
if I can
tweet.
interject, what they spent already on things like expanding the SNAP benefits when people can't even use their damn food stamps to buy food. Under the COVID situation, they could have actually added more to a UBI, or to at least the first initial relief amount, and made the first initial relief amount truly universal instead of the bureaucratic boondoggle that it ended up becoming, resulting in a lot of people being excluded that shouldn't have been.
I think we're just like it's an excuse to get jobs for like incompetent, lazy people. Because I'm sorry, like bureaucrats aren't exactly that.
Conservatives have had this argument calling them interventionalists for decades. Government providing a job for themselves, administrating a program.
Right. And so anyway, you guys, if you want me to read my letter to Scalise, maybe.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Scalise, I find it disgusting that you say giving the American people $2,000 a month for the duration of this unprecedented crisis is akin to socialism. First of all, the government is telling us to stay home. Second of all, there's nothing patriotic about getting a disease and spreading it to your neighbors just because we have to work and put our lives in danger. Third of all, when there is more money in consumer pockets when the crisis ends, it'll help businesses around the country more because people just haven't been spending the little money they have on necessities. And last but not least, you printed trillions of dollars to give to corporations, including airlines and cruise lines, who should have been saving all their money and not be given our hard-earned taxpayer dollars that we worked for. If you want to talk about socialism, yes, we have socialism coming from the Republican Party in favor of corporations who do not earn the money they get by being good to the customers. Rather, the government just pays them directly and they don't even need to survive. So if you want to talk about the real socialists, you and your political and corporate friends better start looking in the mirror. The American people are not asking for socialism. We are asking for capitalism that doesn't start at zero.
Very nicely done, Ariel.
That's brilliant.
Thanks.
Bravo, Ariel.
I can only hope that he actually reads it.
Yeah, that'll.
One staffer goes, "Oh shit, he needs to read this."
Right. Yeah, I'm basically saying, well, you're the socialists. You and your friends are all socialists for yourselves. You know.
Well,
Who even cares? What is the problem with socialism to begin with? It's like anytime someone's like socialism, I want to ask them what
like,
you have against worker-owned businesses.
There's not. I'm just turning it on its head. I'm using like a tool to it's they always like using a broad brush to paint everyone with a reasonable idea as that word, but when you throw it back at their face and they don't have a response for it, let's see what happens.
So I actually have a very conservative grandfather who does not understand the political nuance of anything. But he genuinely believes communism and socialism and proto-socialism are all the same things. And I believe that this is pretty thorough throughout the Republican Party, that they believe socialism is raw distribution of resources like milk, meat, bread, basic things like that, and then you expect the people themselves to make whatever else they need or trade whatever else they need amongst themselves, which is very, very old proto-socialism. Not even communism was that basic.
Well,
It's like just Stone Age living.
Exactly. That's the painful misconception.
That's silly. That wouldn't
the
society
Republican
wouldn't
Party
work. The government would never want that.
Exactly. That's my point. That's the logical fallacy that we have to point out. Communism and socialism, even now, might be a slight regression, but it's not what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Have you guys noticed like these government websites that can hardly handle traffic? And then it's like, but I don't get it. Like Amazon and Google and all this, they have like millions of people on their sites like every day, and we don't see like that. But then like you go to an unemployment website and it's like crashing and all this crap. I mean, like what is this?
Well, because
Like,
the infrastructure of the unemployment website is very poor because it's not incentivized to be good. There's no benefit to the government by having a good unemployment website, so they don't really care to put anything more than the minimum in. Whereas, Google has to keep their website up because billions of people use it every day.
Like the government does like NASA, and like you're telling me they can't even like operate this site.
I would love you to actually discuss with scientists between NASA and SpaceX and let them show each other the massive discrepancies between government-funded programs and actual private corporations. The quality difference because of the profit models are radically different. The government is trying to prevent inflation, while a corporation is just trying to get as many individual dollars as possible.
Right. This inflation.
Well, I believe that our government agencies could do a much better job with their web stuff if we hadn't gotten rid of the Office of Technology, like Andrew Yang had mentioned.
Oh yeah, we would actually have a semi-functioning government if we hadn't gotten rid of that.
We should like have like an office of like incompetence measurement or some crap like that, like
then everyone would get fired.
Right.
The dead giveaway was when I saw this thing about a month ago that the government was desperately looking for COBOL programmers,
right,
to help deal with their antiquated dinosaur age.
Wait, did you really say cobalt?
Yeah,
we talked about that a while ago.
COBOL hasn't been used. I mean, and I'm on the older side of Gen X, okay, who isn't a digital native, but I'm digital savvy enough to know that if you're going to set something up, you're going to set it up in Python and you're going to dev on the freaking cloud. What's these guys' problem? If you're going to get people money, you're going to offer them the option to, get paid your income tax refund or your coronavirus relief check through Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App.
I actually think this problem is more on how the government gets infrastructure programs bidded for, because the same problem happens with construction companies as well. The old joke about Section 8 housing or rent-controlled housing? It's generally because the government paid for the construction of that, and they were looking at a vast majority of companies that were all bidding for those government dollars and bidding the lowest.
We should just like have like a general taxpayer brain surgery fund or something like that, and send them all to Washington.
I don't know about that, but if you look at the if you look at the systems that are crashing, though, most of the time when they do crash, that's because they have too many users piling in suddenly, and that's definitely what's happening right now. Is the sudden influx of millions of people that were not applying. They were not ready for that traffic, and anybody wouldn't be ready, even if it was Amazon and they had started out with a small, if you suddenly put an extra 100 million people on a site that was using hundreds of thousands, that's going to be too much.
Yeah, and that's the big complexity problem is, even if you have it online, it's so much simpler just to enter a bank account, your social security number, and wait for the check to hit.
Exactly. But see, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
I know, right? That would be cost effective.
So So yeah, these. So I've also worked in an industry that was that is still super backwards, and I'm just going to call them out. The travel industry is totally backwards in their
Oh my
technology.
goodness, I'm
Really?
like this close to just uprooting them. They are so fucking antiquated and cause so much CO2 emissions that are completely unnecessary in our internet age.
Well, not only that, but their technology specifically. Okay, so I remember working in the travel industry. Probably it's been a while, back in before my children were born. So let's say 2000 or earlier. But during that time that I worked for them, already their technology was so far behind. They were still using like teletype terminal type of things. Okay, while everybody else is on the PC and the Apple, and they, like the travel agents that I worked with, they had been trained up on teletype type of things, so they knew how to put in the codes to get the computer to spit back at them, the prices of tickets and things like that. But so they could book the tickets using this teletype stuff, but they couldn't actually write an email letter. And that, you just push like in Microsoft Word or something like that, because it was too natural. Like, you just type what you're naturally thinking. They're used to thinking in this code system. And I think that system may still even exist right now. And so the problem is they can't, it's not only just one government then. Like in the government, we have the slowness to respond because it's massive and it's got all these different states that all have to, come along with them. But you also have, in the travel industry, a worldwide problem of technology. So if you've got, countries in Africa that all have to switch over to every new system that they devise, it's very hard to get consensus on that. And you can't, buy and sell tickets with everybody on a different system. And so it's quite difficult.
Oh.
And that's kind of leading into our own problem with the not only unemployment, but also the patchwork system of our state laws during this crisis, namely Medicaid. Some states don't even have Medicaid available for low-income people.
Right, because they didn't sign up for the expansion. My state, this is how I almost died when I developed Crohn's disease. In my state, if you were a poor adult who didn't have children, it didn't matter if you came down with cancer. You did not get Medicaid. After a major medical crisis literally wiped you out and left you, unable to get medical care. You didn't have a job. You didn't have health insurance. Too bad. Don't have kids. Don't qualify. Yeah. So my state was one of the last ones that drug its feet, and it had to, be bitch slapped every step of the way. Pardon my French. To be hauled to the table to get on board with the Medicaid expansion. And that happened just in time before I got slapped with the type 2 diabetes diagnosis a year after almost dying from a Crohn's complication. This is where, this is all a result. This goes back to the Welfare Reform Act of 1996. Prior to that, SNAP benefits or food stamps and Medicaid were federal. They were an entitlement that, if you couldn't afford medical care, you could, if you were below a certain income, you could qualify for Medicaid, whether you had kids or not. If you were unemployed but rendered ineligible for whatever the myriad of reasons are for an unemployment benefit check, you could get general assistance and you could get food stamps. But now with welfare reform, what happened was all that stuff was turned into block grants from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that then oversees the suspension of those block grants to the states, for the states to use as they see fit. And they don't necessarily use that money for the poor. In our state, a lot of money slotted for SNAP benefits and for TANF gets plowed into faith-based nonprofits that teach poor single mothers how to get married.
Oh, yeah, Jacqueline, that's what we have often talked about, that not only the 50, people don't realize that the 50 states are so different from one another, partly because of the way that we allow them to manipulate and handle their own, federal benefits. So you have this federal umbrella that gives out the money, but then all the states administer it differently. And so some people in some states, will think of it as a wonderful program because their state is doing such a good job. And then in other states, people are like, no, we need to just tear this out because it is causing so much heartache and pain and anger in people.
Personally, I think that this laboratory of American law is a brilliant method of diversification to actually tease out the most effective administration of what these programs could mean. So the states that aren't doing it well should be clearly, blatantly shown as a failure, and they should adopt other states. And I'm sure this would really hurt Texas if they had to adopt California's model.
Well, that's the thing, is it's very strange to me that Texas believes that we're doing such a great job when I have lived in California and I have seen them do so much better. For example, with SNAP alone, I was only on SNAP in California for a short time, but I noticed several things. But let's just talk about one. Like, I don't know about whether you can get food delivered there. I know I can't in Texas. Okay, I can't go in and buy anything online, and I can't have anything delivered to me. But I know in California you can actually get. I think that might be my mic, Shael. I have this noisy
I see
laptop.
that Jacqueline there's a green. There's her
green
avatar
line?
goes green when she's
Okay.
not speaking, so I can tell there's some background noise coming through on Jacqueline's mic, but she's muted now. Thank you, Jacqueline. I don't know. Maybe there was also some on yours. Anyway, please continue.
Yeah, I apologize because every time I turn on my mic, I've got this background noise on my laptop too. But I'm trying to get that taken care of eventually. So, if you're in, oh, this is cool, Jeremy. I'd love to read that in a minute. But if you're in California, though, you can also get a SNAP program that helps you to buy food at the farmers markets. Now, not all of the farmers markets do it, but what they do is they translate. They have an EBT machine, okay, and you go to that machine somewhere in the market, and you get quite a bit of. So you can take your EBT card and buy these farm-to-market bucks, like farmers' bucks. And so you just have the farmers' bucks, and then you can walk around the market and spend them. So they're like kind of like a chits system. But okay, so back to
Ariel,
Sheridan's
please,
point, which is
mute
that
your mic. You have some background noise now.
Sheridan, your point was that it would be nice if some of the states could learn from others, but I don't think that they are learning because they don't.
You can build in a couple of
want
ways for them to learn. Either a administrative feedback, ideally voting, to get more people who would be willing to change the programs through more local journalism. But I think that more powerfully and more on message with us, a UBI, simply allowing those people to move, to just clear their assets, get a little liquid, and have money to travel and know that they will have money to stay alive with, and they can just go to a better state. And states are incredibly reliant on population numbers. That's why a lot of these southern states have incredibly heavy marriage and childbirth and increasing population orientations.
You know, in fact, that's exactly what I was going to, which is the reason they're not learning is that the people who are on SNAP benefits, the people who are getting rural housing benefits or housing, and all of that, we are actually bringing money into their state. And so if they can find a way to keep us here and get us stuck here, right, and their program is administered so poorly that nobody ever can climb out of the pit that is poverty, then it's great for them. And if you don't leave, right, you continue to bring that money into your state, and you continue to thrive off of, this wide base of poor people.
And that's
So
where
it's
I
very
get
strange.
into people who are like, how are you going to pay for it? Or the more left people I talk to who say, well, you can't just get rid of welfare programs. And I'm like, look at their administration. The money is still from federal government to person, but there's a middleman of a state. This is the conservative argument for the past 5 decades, that states make people dependent on the state. If the federal government provided a basic income, people would no longer be dependent on their state.
So that's, totally portable money in cash. Now that's where you get the control back to the actual person that you're supposedly helping. I love that. I see Jacqueline says she has a comment.
Yes, I just wanted to touch on what you and Sheridan were saying. This is what I was trying to get across to my state lawmakers, because my state is one of the worst for offering options to SNAP benefit for SNAP benefit recipients who are shut-ins and who literally have no way of getting food. In my area in Erie County, which is relatively rural, it's particularly problematic. And when I see money being wasted on expending a program that's too punitive to use for no reason other than, hey, let's just make life as inconvenient and miserable for the poor as possible. That's the whole idea behind it, that grocery delivery and curbside service is a privilege that the quote-unquote undeserving poor, useless eaters don't deserve. But the problem is that when you're putting money into expanding food stamps, instead of just saying, let's get rid of these means-tested programs and food stamps that people cannot use their food stamps to buy food, what's the point in having them? Just give people money. If people need food that week, they've got money. They can buy their stuff through Instacart or Fresh Direct or whatever. If they need to pay their utilities, they've got that covered too. If they need to buy something to get their car fixed, it's the most portable problem-solving medium we have to work with, and it just makes no sense to me. I would dispute anybody was actually conservative if they defend a status quo of spending billions of dollars to keep in place a system that is more hell-bent on making sure people in need are excluded than what it would cost to just, cut a check that would be a social floor to everybody, that no matter what happens in your life, you will never be left unable to get food, a place to live, utilities, or transport, or clothing.
Yeah. So that SNAP food that I just read here from Sleepy Girl, how to get groceries delivered with SNAP food program food stamps, I did read through it, and it shows that there are some states where you can get it done, but not Jacqueline's state, and I don't think mine either. Yeah.
And if we had more dynamic local journalism, I believe these problems would be very blatant in most Americans' faces of how some states are failing compared to others.
Yeah, so I think there are some local coverage that is in these small town papers that actually does, cover some of these issues. So, for example, in my town, we have the Palestine Herald, I think it's called the Herald Tribune or something like that. And it's a really excellent paper, but, I can't even read it because I'm too poor to, get a subscription of it. So I have to just kind of wait for things to be online or, happen to see them in a doctor's office or something that's laying there. And of course, sometimes our local news coverage will get picked up by a national paper or something like that. But very seldom. It's usually like there's been a disaster, and so, they want to check in on the local people on some sort of tornado or something like that. But what about these local issues about, how things are actually in the rural areas? That doesn't get picked up too often.
Many great economists have pointed out that the best way to know a society is to understand the mundane, everyday life that people have to deal with, and you will understand exactly how the culture feels.
The true measure of any society is how it treats its most vulnerable, i.e., the least of these.
Indeed.
Yes, and that's why I like to take vacations when I had the chance to take them in the past. in a way where I just go and live somewhere and be as local as possible instead of doing all the tourist stuff. And then while I'm there, I get to find out, how do they deal with different problems? And in fact, I thought that would make a really great show. So if anybody ever wants to fund me to travel the world and go do that with my 6-year-old, I will bring back to you everything that a mom experiences with her 6-year-old in these different countries. That would be cool.
Steve-O has left, Disdonn has left because I guess our mutual friend talked to him, and he got very upset, and it was about Joe Biden. I really kind of am curious about this now. I mean,
I am too.
I don't blame him. My own mom, who's a very proud Democrat, is kind of like, oh well, now we're going to do Biden, and I'm like, really?
Of course not. No.
You were Warren. You were for Warren. Like, she was exactly opposite of everything Biden is for right now.
Yeah, Biden is less likely to give us a UBI than Trump, I firmly believe, unfortunately. And I mean, and Trump is his own monster, of course. But neoliberalism is much less likely to allow for a UBI than whatever Trump's ideology can be called.
Well, the thing is that I think he'll just sign it. I think he just likes to see his name signed,
You think Biden will just sign anything, you mean?
No, I think he'll have a hard time even holding the pen.
Oh, so you think Trump just likes to sign anything?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, he does like to see his name on things, like, the check that went out for stimulus. That was pretty cool.
I saw some PhDs lighting their letter that they got on fire, and it made me happy. I was like, yeah.
I didn't get
People lit their check on fire? What?
Not their check, the letter that they got with it, with Donald Trump's signature on it.
I didn't get a letter. I was looking forward to the letter. I only got a check from Dear President. I really wanted the letter as well.
Yeah, I was actually incredibly surprised and grateful I didn't get means tested out of that check.
Yeah, I'm glad you weren't either, Sheridan. The whole fact that there are so many people that were excluded is really troubling. And
yeah, almost 40% of our population.
Yes, and I got into it with somebody who attacked Scott Santon's and Heidi Briani's, who we've had on the show before, who's running on a UBI platform out in Oregon, who they were being attacked by a drive-by asshole on the internet who attacked Heidi, accusing her on Twitter of retweeting Scott Santon's just to get votes. And this guy was saying that UBI is just going to, the people who are pro-UBI are just out to shaft the disabled poor. And Scott tagged me to come in. We had an idiot spill in aisle 4. Come clean up. Right?
I was going to say, how does that hurt the disabled poor that they, as a person, get guaranteed cash to feed themselves and house themselves, no matter what?
Sheridan, it doesn't. And I basically drilled it down for this guy like he was 4. And he got very abusive and argumentative and was basically calling me a rich elitist scumbag. And I said, look, buddy, I'm a poor, disabled 53-year-old woman without a car who's diabetic and a Crohn's patient. You better check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Did he then go, well, you're white?
I had a similar thing on Twitter happen. A person that I had just met on Twitter seemed pretty cool. We have a mutual friend who had just lost his house. He got evicted because of this crisis. So I tagged the Yang Gang and Humanity Forward, and I was like, UBI saves lives. I know you got some dough for this, cutie. And that friend said, how dare you make this a political point? And I'm like, blocked. I don't need to deal with your idiot toxicity. This friend of ours lost his home. If you aren't in a home right now, you will likely die from this plague.
Yeah, if not exposure to the freaking elements.
Well, the plague, I assume,
that might be going a little bit far, considering that most is not the 3 to 8% even. I mean,
Well, like Jacqueline said, the exposure to the elements is the actual killer. If you get exposed, your body goes into virus fighting mode. If you get a bacteria,
that's
you
true.
go immediately septic. That is death.
Yeah, I mean, there's a high that the homeless population has the lowest rate of life expectancy out of every other subgroup of the population for that reason alone. But this drive-by asshole on the internet who was just smearing Heidi Briani's and attacking Scott Santon's and all UBI advocates, especially Yang Gang people. This guy had it. Goes by the handle JT or whatever. He especially had a hard-on against Andrew Yang, and I attempted to educate him, and I was very restrained. Shael, you would have been proud. I was very restrained. And but I told him, I'm like, look, you're speaking for people, and you're taking away our voices and trying to say what's good for us. How is jumping through the hoops of means-tested programs like the SSI program, which doesn't allow you to have total assets more than $2,000 and forces you to get a divorce from your spouse and live on the streets and leave the marital home as a 53-year-old diabetic and Crohn's patient while you wait out a 2-year appeals process to get a $700 a month SSI check. How is that for my own good? And with a UBI, there's no strings attached. If I am able to, after getting on my feet and stabilized, I can then start committing some money out of that towards my own, carving out my own path out of poverty through different, things to try and to participate in that I right now don't have the income that would allow me to do it. I wouldn't be penalized. I would not lose that UBI. That would be the floor. That's the difference between a floor and a ceiling. Do you understand this? Do you need me to explain the difference between a floor and a ceiling to you?
I'm looking at that chart that Jeremy put up, and isn't that just heartbreaking? That life expectancy could be 45. I'm 45. Right now that number is heartbreaking.
Yes, I'm 53, and yep.
That's for the U.S. homeless people. For anyone who's not looking at the chart and just listening to the podcast. So I actually think that part of these serious problems that we're seeing right now, including the problems with democracy, in that we are trying to get legislators to work. They're not working. Practically everything that we talk about here really touches on the fact that our democracy is not working well. And that's why I shared earlier today a link, and because it might have already kind of fallen off, I'm going to put it here again. This is the page back in 300 something BC. Plato was writing about the Republic and the 5 regimes, which he considered forms of government that basically would cycle into each other. And so he said aristocracy inevitably leads to timocracy, which then leads to oligarchy, and then it leads to democracy. And here we are in democracy, and we think to ourselves, wow, this, we are at the culmination of the pyramid. Nope, that's not what Plato says. So he said that democracy leads right back to tyranny, okay, and then the cycle will repeat again. And so I feel like we're just watching this process play out, and it was... Here's a person who had been written about it 2,000 years ago, and he's being proven correct over and over again. Because now again we've got people, realizing that democracy isn't necessarily the highest form of every type of government. Everything I've seen this year has been really negative. I haven't seen democracy working for us. Do you guys see anything that's actually, useful or
That's a great point. No, and there's no discussion of alternative methods ever. It is so outside the Overton to suggest any other method of selecting leadership that is never seriously given weight.
I want to give a heavy reminder to the main reason, and that's the Constitution and the copycat levels of government. We basically have the same structure from our federal government through our state to municipalities to localities, and it's all formed on the Constitution. and how it orders government into the three branches: the branch that does, the branch that makes laws, and the branch that checks the laws against the people.
I
That's how it's supposed to work. That's how it's
Like-
supposed to, in theory, work. But that's not how it's working. Because
stupid.
I completely agree, because the money factor is the biggest bottleneck. The basic income would allow so many more people to stop thinking about next week's food or next month's rent, and they could actually get politically involved and donate money to political campaigns. And it would almost immediately upturn our capitalistic democracy, because people would now have power. And like you were saying earlier, the reason the Republican Party is dragging their feet, and honestly what the Democrats are as well, is because it's such a hesitant thing to give people that much power, especially for interventionists who really want to maintain the status quo.
yeah, that's pretty much what it is. It's that's where a lot of this culture of what Ariel calls workism comes from. I mean, these people are just not dealing. They're not playing with a full deck in the first place. Never mind a full deck that's from reality. I mean, people are thinking that, well, if we just end the lockdowns and force everybody to go back to their jobs, everything's going to be honky-dory. No, it won't. Half the people that lost their jobs as a result, and when I say lost their jobs, I'm not talking about just people who are W-2 employees. I'm talking about self-employed. I'm talking about gig workers. I'm talking about people who had their own small businesses like you, Sheridan, that were forced to shutter and scuttle everything after they sunk everything they had worked for their entire lives into making what looked to be a profitable business that got derailed horribly by this pandemic. Okay?
I really appreciate you bringing that up. I also wanted to mention to you guys that I'm now full-time on that business because my college has let me go.
Yeah. And this idea that of forcing people to go back to work, there is at least half of the people who have lost their sources of income. We're going to say earned income, not just from jobs, but from self-employment, small business owner, gig worker, that have been sidelined and do not have any bright prospects for rapid or immediate reabsorption into the economy once the economy recovers. And we're not sure if it's going to be a U-shaped recovery or an L-shaped recovery. And what that will depend entirely on how our elected leaders handle it. If they continue to fight against giving people a UBI, they're going to turn what could be a U-shaped recovery into an L-shaped recovery, which means that it'll be a lot longer than it took the Great Depression to recover.
I
We're
completely
talking
agree.
about decades.
Depending on how our leadership handles this economic crisis, I foresee we could see the 100-year crash genuinely happen. But if our government continues to inflate the markets, we may never even recognize it until it's actually on our doorstep in our communities. Because
what is the 100-year crash supposed to be?
I'll elaborate on that in just a moment. I despise general stock market indexes as a measurement for the government, but it is an incredible measurement for businesses because it is the combined information that is currently available is put into that price over the millions of individuals buying and selling in the market. So the 100-year crash is a theoretical debt cycle that, along with the general business cycle of every 10 years, we see debt crashes that are just tipped off by a little thing because companies over-leverage themselves because our inflationary economy incentivizes the over-leverage into debt because debt is cheap, and our government continually makes debt cheaper. The 100-year crash is the accumulation of all that being pushed aside. So the theory is that every 10 years, the crash happens, but not all the debt is fully zeroed out. And that little bit gets knotted over until it just cannot be knotted over anymore. So the theory is that when we started this welfare capitalism after the Great Depression, and about 25 to 30, that was about the beginning of the first cycle. That was the 100-year cycle there, when we saw that massive crash, bread lines, people just unable to feed themselves.
Sheridan. So I think I was trying to lead back to our discussion about socialism and how people have this. That's okay. I hope I'm not missing if there's to talk about.
No, I just did a tangent on that. I was going to bring it back by describing how Plato's forms of government are the political government, and the socialism, communism, or the communism to capitalism dichotomy with socialism in the middle is the economic form of government, of how people actually do things and how they organize how things get done, not how people are organized like Plato's government describes.
Like the decision-making process is sort of who gets to make the decisions and how decisions are made. That's the regimes that Plato was talking about. Versus now we're also talking about how do we build a good economic system. And maybe we should talk about both of them, but let's not confuse them all the time and, get all these emotions and nationalistic and tribalistic feelings involved.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
That's how they distract you. It's all a distract. Well, like they like to say that we have these like freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Who gives a damn about that if you're dying, about to die? Like I just want to get a sledgehammer and smack them.
I wonder what happened in the 1820s and 1830s. Was there a crash then?
Oh, are we looking at this chart together? Oh, 1870, right? And then I've got the chart blown up on the screen. Maybe Jeremy can do that for people who are watching. And you're looking at a crash at around 1875 to 1880. Is that right?
If I'm not mistaken, that was when Russia collapsed and they had their first, essentially, king put in place, their first czar. Or it was a czar that came down. They put in a democracy at the time. It was like the Revolution of 1813. But again, it depends on what market you're talking about, because even Rome had a financial collapse. Rome could be argued as the first economic nation that even used quantitative easing.
Could also be argued that the collapse of the Roman Empire was also the first official collapse of the first global economy, because if you look at what followed that, the Dark Ages and how that panned out across Europe,
True, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this chart, and I just want to point out to people that when you're not mathematically minded and looking at things as a mathematician, you may miss the fact that, this is on a logarithmic scale, and that it skips forward suddenly from 1895 to 2000 right there. So I find it really interesting. Like, the reason they use a logarithmic scale is, of course, to show you the little, perturbations at the lower scales, and you can see those more clearly. But you don't get a sense of just how crazy high the highs are, right? Because if you actually drew it on a regular scale, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up, then it would just be like a flat line down at the bottom where all of these other eras are earlier.
Yep. And what you're looking at there is an example of something known as reversion to the mean.
Maybe you could expound on that a bit for us.
Okay, reversion to the mean is something that's referred to in the trading community as when the stock markets, when the valuations end up, when there's a serious pullback. And I mean a big pullback, not just like 4 or 5 clicks, but I'm talking about crashes. When there's a huge pullback and they go back to testing previous market lows and previous market highs at various levels of support and resistance. When valuations are not in line, with, economic fundamentals, you have what's called a reversion to the mean, where they're pull back.
So what I'm gathering from this is that Sheridan says that, well, not all the debt is forgiven, but honestly, the debt, if you just forgive all the debt, that will not help because it's built into the system, and that's why you see these cycles. Right? It doesn't matter if you start the debt at 0 or at, we have $100 million to start with, but it's just the problem is it's going to continue to grow. It doesn't stay the same. And so there's this massive, passing around of the debt until somebody ends up with all the debt.
That's why we have the moral hazard now and the business cycle, is because our entire economy is oriented towards inflation. The simple fact that money gets less valuable is what encourages debt. If we had a deflationary orientation, that would completely change both the meaning of cash as well as the meaning of debt. And companies would be incentivized to not go into debt and not over leverage themselves unless they have a very, very good profitable plan to make it worth it.
Well, this is an interesting idea, though. How about this one? How about we don't issue money with debt attached to it? We just issue money like a normal, like in the past, where governments would actually print the money.
Well, that still falls into the distribution problem and inflation as well over a long time. So if we did like a UBI, that would probably be the best way to just have the distribution.
Well, for example, psychologically, how would that change the way that our legislators talk and everything if we didn't have a massive federal debt hanging over us?
Well, that's just it. The federal debt really isn't all that important, especially now that we have quantitative easing to infinity. The Federal Reserve's balance sheets, as they have said, are infinite. They have an unlimited capacity to store debt. So they can literally just keep buying debt out of the system. What we need to do is start consolidating and squashing that debt by having people actually try and pay it down.
I think that we have a system that's so complex that it's hard to understand what the ramifications are if you change one aspect of it. So, for example, why do we need to have this federal debt that then pays people who can afford to buy it, and then creates this whole bond market?
The federal debt is a foreign policy tool rather than a domestic economic tool. It's to allow other governments to buy American dollars and to get a return so that we have international trust.
So basically, that China owning a lot of our debt is where they own our federal debt, and through that they're able to get U.S. dollars.
Exactly. That's actually China's biggest economic play over the past few decades, has been acquire other people's currency so that we can trade with them. Because America politically negotiated ourselves as the economic center of the world. We literally ripped it away from China, who had held on to that for thousands of years because of their incredible land mass and population sizes.
They're working on getting it back because they're just desperate. Now starting the new OPEC. They're starting to break that OPEC hold. And that was part of our strategy, was that, everybody had to buy their oil in U.S. dollars. But now I think Russia and China are balking at that and finally breaking away. They're strong enough to do it.
And that's the big global foreign concern right now, is seeing the Chinese, I believe, yuan, become a global reserve currency and becoming being able to compete with the US dollar directly, not just indirectly with their economic manipulations, but directly through basically telling countries what to do. For example, they are already doing this through their Belt and Road Initiative. Their over leverage of debt onto countries that those countries obviously can't really pay. They fund these massive infrastructure projects like ports, airports, roads, and they also have a stipulation on these loans to these countries that if you can't pay, we repossess what is built, and you can only use a Chinese company to build it. So the Chinese automatically get their money back, and they also have political ownership over the ports or airports or whatever. And they've already leveraged this. They've already used this to confiscate an African port.
So wouldn't you say that China has learned a lot from capitalism and democracy?
Oh, 100%. In fact,
Because I feel like that stuff we have been very good at, and we've done that to many countries, destabilize their currencies so that they end up basically on a dollar, on the dollar standard.
And China's been doing that, but on the opposite side, on the back end side. They've been doing it through debt leveraging, while America does that through equity leveraging. Our corporations go to countries and say, we'll build this factory for you. We just take a share of the profits.
Yeah, I'm not seeing why that should be any worse for them to do it their way and for us to do it. I mean, essentially, we have the same control over people. Like, I feel that we have great control over that Panama Canal, which is incredibly important to shipping, right? If you can't get through that canal to move your goods, you're going to go all the way around, which is, that's a long way.
Yeah, the only way we could obviate that is if we could find a way to make, what the hell is it called? The Darien Gap. Make that traversable by road. And there's no way to do that. The Darien Gap, it connects Panama, which is Central America, with Latin America. It's not traversable by land. People risk their lives coming from places like Colombia through the Darien Gap to get up through Central and eventually to North America. And it's literally risking life and limb to do that, because if you're not at risk of literally getting eaten by snakes that can swallow an adult whole, which they have those, you're risking getting shot by narco terrorists that are hiding out in the jungle. Colombian narco terrorists that are hiding out. So crossing the Darien Gap is, literally you're taking your life into your own hands.
Yeah, it's like it's like a special trial for people who want to move from one side to another when they're migrating.
Yeah, and it's like it's not a patch of land. People think that you can just make any kind of land arable or build infrastructure on it. And that's not true. I mean, if you look at what the Darien Gap is, it's rainforests, it's jungle, it's rivers that have anacondas in it that can swallow you whole. It's you've got mudslides that can take you out in the blink of an eye that occur there,
and yet people will brave it just to go somewhere else. That's really interesting.
That's correct.
So the Panama Canal, and then there's the Suez Canal. Now these two canals are so important, and they're controlled by certain types of powers. They're not controlled by, everyone. And so that gives these people more control over the entire world's commerce than you can possibly imagine if you just don't think about it too much, and you just kind of think everybody's, equal player. No, there's power, serious power concentrated in controlling these places. So
I want to bring it back to what you were saying about China and how they do business differently than we do. And I think that's a great thing to hold on to, because it really identifies how we're going to see the two main survival strategies that we saw at the beginning of life during the Cambrian explosion play out in an economic sense, because China is going to do a more central, everyone focus around China approach. Through ownership of these ports, they're going to force these nations to essentially trade with only China.
Okay, but we're already doing a lot of that, because
We are.
look at us.
We are doing
We're the
it
ones who
through-
are doing a lot of trade with China.
As I was going to say, ourselves, we are doing that through a diversification strategy. So we are having several different companies do their own little things in the world, and our own government place sanctions on what those companies can or can't do with the world. So we're allowing more small actors rather than one central authority. And those are the two economic strategies that are going to play out.
Yeah, and I actually think that China's strategy is excellent, and that they're actually learning about the power, power plays. They've been very
Oh, yeah.
patient. They've built
For the
themselves
past
up.
20 years, they've
know?
been flexing their currency, fully utilizing modern monetary theory, doing everything short of actually a basic income to their citizens. Like,
Sheridan, as using the or comparing it to the Cambrian explosion is it's just hilarious. So yeah, I had to see like what they looked like side by side. So I posted it here in the chat. But yeah, you can see that the growth of the Cambrian explosion, and then right underneath it's China's GDP, and holy shit, it's like the same fucking thing.
Yep.
Well, see, the thing about GDP is you issue more money, you have more GDP in a sense.
And well, that's actually the hysterical thing about inflation growth, and why I tell people that inflation isn't measuring what you think it's measuring. Because you can, and China has just inflated their currency a lot, but that's not undue. They actually have industry and have billions of people that can economically leverage that.
Not to be kind of like being the wild card here, but I think like Asian culture has so much less drama in it and more analysis on problem solving and getting things done and being efficient, and that's why they're murdering us.
Interpersonal studies identifies this as the Western individualist orientation and the Eastern collectivist orientation.
Right.
Where
because
Asian countries think about the whole community.
Right. Well, I mean, that would make sense. And when you're competing on an international scale and you're so like divided at home, and then you got the other side that's so streamlined and so together, and they're just like operating as one unit, and there you are on the other side constantly infighting amongst yourselves. Well, like, it's a no-brainer. And that's why I thought like Andrew Yang, with his problem solving and no getting into drama kind of ideas, was like, just, that's what we need right now. But you have so many goddamn idiots.
Ariel, you are talking about one of my favorite things, which is that there is a difference between, tyranny. I don't know, like a tyrannical, system where it's top down versus, listening to the people from the bottom up. And you can actually do that with any one of those 5 forms of government, in a sense, even though one of those is called tyranny. But the idea is that, you can have an authoritarian system that still listens to what the people are actually wanting and responds to it. So I'm looking at trying to make government more responsive. And that's why I put up this TED Talk by Eric Lee, who is educated here in the United States, went to UC Berkeley, worked for Stanford, but also went home to China where he began his journey. And so he talks about how he heard the same fairy tale in China and in the United States about how their political system was the very, very top of the line, newest model, and it's going to be the best of the best of the best. And neither one of them is true. If you have to look at what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, for sure. But it was funny when I don't know if you know Ronnie Chang, the Daily Show. He's like if we had an Asian president, he would just go down the list of things that are working and not working, and then he's like, okay, that's working, that's not working, make it work, damn it. Oh, this isn't working, like slap these guys around, like, hey, get to work. And it was so, and I'm like, he's talking about Andrew Yang.
Yeah, he literally was. He actually said he was campaigning for him after a while. He just straight out said, yeah, I'm campaigning for this guy.
Yeah.
I wonder how Andrew Yang would handle, if Andrew Yang was our president, which would be great. I wonder how he would handle these protesters that are protesting the lockdown and
Right?
they're not going to be responsible for a second wave that'll really sink our proverbial battleship here. How would he handle that? How do you think he would deal with this when you've got people saying, oh, the coronavirus is a hoax and these are fake doctors and fake nurses. These are people that are blocking hospitals.
I mean, if we already had like our UBI, probably they wouldn't be in that kind of mental state. But the ones that are, they would say, okay, you really have no right to do this because you are like getting the support you need. Like you're not. It's not like you'll starve and you'll have nothing. But we can't say that because we aren't doing a UBI. So, and maybe with a UBI, people would be less sympathetic to these people, and these people would have less excuse to do what they're doing. But since we don't have that, it's just
the other thing too that I always wondered is, these are people that are driving expensive SUVs and trucks to these protests. They're bringing expensive guns to these protests. If you're really that hurt economically, why the fuck are you spending money and time, traveling to go with your guns in your 4x4 SUV to protest, a public health directive
because
State House?
Yeah, they're pathetic because it's
why are they not standing with us when we are saying, hey, look, let's get everybody a basic income so that we can minimize the pain here? And it's like these guys, they've lost the plot, man.
Because of their spending habits, and they're just really pathetic. They just want to be like, oh, but I want my haircut, or I want something like my wife has to do her nails. It's not fair, or something. But it's like, and maybe they just don't know about us and UBI and Andrew Yang. Maybe they just haven't heard of it yet. I don't know.
I mean, considering
Disdonn, you're back. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Considering most of these people probably listen to conservative pundits who are enabling their fear, like Mr. Alex Jones and Rush Limbaugh, I would not be surprised if they have not heard about Andrew Yang. Or
I don't
if they
think
have,
Andrew Yang has been on an interview with Alex Jones. You are correct.
Exactly. And, the only politicians that those pundits care about are like Pelosi and Biden and Hillary Clinton. Those are the only ones. And Hillary Clinton has nothing to do with anything right now. Oh, and Obama, who also has nothing to do with anything right now.
Yeah, they should probably stay out of it more than they like. Hillary did come out and say a few things and get everybody all riled up. But also now we've got these people calling for the Boogaloo. Have you heard of this?
No, I have not.
Yeah,
all right. I put up a little article here because there was some watchdog group that's been saying we've been monitoring things that go on online, and we noticed that there's this word now that people are organizing around. It sounds like a kind of a silly word, but people are making memes. They're making merch. They're using this word to find each other, and the idea is that there's going to be an inevitable second civil war, which is going to have to target liberal political opponents and law enforcement, and they're going to have to force the government, right, through the use of guns and militias, to protect their Second Amendment rights and to become the better government, because they don't believe that politicians will ever vote themselves out of office, right, or write laws that end that cause term limits to cause them to lose their jobs. That they will always protect the oligarchy, or they'll protect the corporate interests, and that's why our democracy is not functional right now.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about the quote-unquote second civil war that is inevitable. I don't think that we're going to see such a scale as the first civil war. It's going to be a lot more diplomatic, probably a lot more boycott, political advertisements. But if it gets to violence and riots, you're just going to see spurts of that. I don't think it's ever going to get really organized to what we saw like in the first Civil War, where the North and South had individual armies.
I mean, you say that, but you also don't realize how well armed a lot of these right-wing militias are. Some of them do have tanks, and they will try to take over probably smaller cities, but they definitely are going to, wreak havoc and try and, bring up their bullshit. And it's going to get bad in a lot of places.
It's going to be like Far Cry 5.
Thanks for saying it before I did. But yeah, and lovely for you to mention that, because that's based in Montana, where I'm living now. And I know people like that who have a lot of heavy armaments for no fucking reason. They raise cattle. They don't need an AR.
Not just Texas, where I live.
So I guess Far Cry 5 isn't too far from reality.
We are in the darkest timeline.
Wow. Yeah. But Far Cry 5 was a cult. Yeah.
I think there have been more people prepping for this war than people prep for the COVID-19, honestly.
Well, yeah, I would 100% agree with that, because COVID-19 came out of nowhere.
But it shouldn't. I mean, I'm trained as a biologist, and I think my entire life we've known that, you could have a really bad influenza-style, type of infection that could spread around the world with all this globalism and everybody flying around in these tiny little boxes that you breathe the same air in. I mean, it's obvious that it was going to happen. And so we've had 30 years to prepare for it, for at least since I was going to school. So very strange.
When I say inevitable, I mean our government, because the past administrations have successfully squashed pandemics from reaching the American shores, because they actually thought critically about what the biology was doing and how we were getting attacked by a biological agent. This government has no concept of defending a biological agent, even when he was trained over and over and over again.
Because his ego's getting in the way. He 100% his ego.
We have a government that says, hey, don't wear masks and get lots of bleach and Lysol and try UV ultraviolet light probes in the brain. And there are people that
That's how we started our conversation.
Everything comes back to the UV bulbs up your ass.
Yep. And everybody was shocked when it was about 30 years ago, there was a newscaster from Philadelphia named Jerry Penacoli. He was taken to the hospital for a gerbil in the butt. This perverted thing with gerbils in his butt. Live gerbil up his butt.
Well, they said that since Trump made those remarks, that nurses have reported that more people are going to ask them about whether they can use Lysol or bleach in some way. Which is, the late night hosts are saying, well, at least they're smart enough to ask and not just take that advice directly.
So isn't it so obvious why China is beating us? Like, what is our national IQ compared to their national IQ?
It's not a matter
of organization.
It's a matter of, for the past 45 years, our public education system has disintegrated. It has been under attack. And a lot of this was promoted through, with a lot of propaganda-like stuff to get the people to go along with this. And I talked about it in one of the articles I wrote on neoliberalism, where I cited, for example, the movie Teachers, which was from 1984. It was a movie that actually drew on the worst stereotypes of high school teachers in the public school system. That it took real, actual examples of things where public education was failing people, but it magnified it even more to basically attack teachers and attack teachers' unions and to make teachers in public schools look bad. And people, a lot of this stuff, when they say art imitates life, there was some truths to that movie, which was a comedy, but it got blown out of proportion and used as propaganda, as one of the many propaganda tools used to sabotage the quality of public education to the point where, no, it's not a matter of IQ. It's a matter of the public education system has been deliberately dumbed down to the point where even if you have a smart kid in a public school system, if you have teachers that believe in bleach enemas and UV light enemas up the butt, okay, that smart kid is fucked with his pants up and no kiss, okay?
So nobody can say that our program is tagged for children.
I mean,
Excuse my French. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We love you
at least
here.
we can laugh, So
Yeah. So I'm actually a homeschooler. By philosophy, I'm actually closer to the unschooling groups, and I'm really more of an unschooler, which was a philosophy brought about by this man, John Holt. I'm putting that link in there for people. So he founded the Growing Without Schooling magazine, and he said that self-directed learning was being done away with. When you put people in these regimented schools, the teachers literally have to plan every 10 minutes of your school day in 10-minute increments, because if you have a classroom of 20-something students and you have nothing for them to do for about 10 minutes, they just start, climbing the walls. They turn into monkeys, and you have to plan these things for them. And that means that some committee somewhere has decided what every single child needs to know, right?
Can go to hell.
In order to pass this year. And so you just, and if you think about that, that's a factory churning out product.
Right. And there's also another John Taylor Gatto. He talked about it.
That's true. That's
right?
true.
And
Yes.
even the TED Talk with the English guy, Sir Ken Robinson, schools kill creativity. It's as clear as day.
It's
So,
a factory
like,
making our product. It's a
Product.
market-based approach to education. I'm glad you touched on that.
as a product of the United States education system, I can say that I self-directed a lot of my own learning, thankfully.
Good.
I was interested in things, and thankfully there was actually a couple books in the library that I could use to self-educate myself. Not only that, my grandmother was wise enough to get us an Encyclopedia Britannica collection for me and my siblings when we were young. So that way, in the age before computers, yes, we didn't have internet when I was a kid until I was in high school. We had to actually do our research papers out of, encyclopedias and books and shit. So, I had, done research. It's like, oh, I like this thing. Oh, I like this thing. Let's look it up. I fall into the same habits now, though, even though Wikipedia isn't the greatest, most peer-reviewed for all this, it's still good to get a basic, clarification of some things every once in a while, especially if you're just looking like, okay, I'm watching this documentary. Who the hell's this person and what do they do and what are they associated with? And it's a lot of, going to my phone and doing shit while I'm, watching things.
And you know what else? I think it's a better idea that we just get all the money and property taxes that go to schools and just give it to a UBI.
Ah, right. Well, I mean, so back to that Wikipedia thing also is that the writers go mostly uncelebrated, but, we really should thank them more because they're people who are constantly, on top of their topics and writing and making sure that people don't go in there and just break stuff and put random, terrible, stupid things in there to break the whole system. So I wanted to call your attention to this great speech. If you haven't seen this speech, you've got to listen to it. It comes from one of my, someone from UC Berkeley again. His name is Mario Savio, and he gave the most amazing speech during a student sit-in type of protest, where he talks about how we have to literally put our bodies upon the gears and stop this machine from moving because we don't want. We are not. Human beings are not products to be manufactured through this factory system.
I mean, and that brings us around to how with this factory system, not only in education, but the fact that most everything's become factory systemized, even farming. It's like, at what point do we just take all the profits and distribute them so that we can replace human labor with labor force that's actual slaves, i.e. robotics. We have the technology. My cousin works for other relatives of mine at their farm in, is it Nebraska or Missouri? Somewhere down there. But they have a large, hundreds and hundreds of acres farmland. They were smart enough to buy the latest model of combine that is basically autopilot. You draw your little pattern on the GPS, and it's linked up with the satellite. And he just basically sits back, drinks a beer, watches TV, and lets the damn thing do its thing. The only reason why he's there is in case it breaks down.
Yeah. It's funny, we're talking about factories and repeatable processes. I don't know if any of you actually heard about the Dead Rising games. It's about fighting zombies, but in the latest installment, they said this military person admitted that the zombie outbreak happened was because the government or some corporate interests just wanted a way to create cheap labor, but it all went out of hand.
Have you seen Shaun of the Dead?
Right.
Oh yeah, that's a great movie. I love the humor in it. It's a parody of Dawn of the Dead, which was the seminal, everybody agrees, the zombie movie of all time that then became the, sort of how everybody thought of what zombies were.
Yeah, think about the subtext of the zombie, the theme of the monster. It's this mindless horde that just does damage and doesn't know what it's doing. It just consumes, right? Right. And there's, obvious parallels. That's obviously why the zombie is such a popular monster today in our modern culture.
They are so relatable. That's why.
Two more films from the film buff / former animator here. If you want to really get into some philosophical things about our mechanical factory-based society, two good films to look into would be They Live and what was the other one? My brain's having a fart right now. Network.
Network
those are two good ones.
Thing. That's the Howlett 8 thing. That's why I'm going outside to Howlett 8 because of Network. Because in Network, he calls for people to go outside and just start yelling from their windows that we will not take this anymore. Is that right?
I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore!
Oh my god, I love your yell. Do it again. My god, that was awesome.
You're gonna take it!
I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore! Also, that's kind of funny. What was that, Jacqueline?
Say that.
Yeah.
Was Jacqueline the one singing fucking Twisted Sister?
Yeah, that was me.
D. Snyder, if you have ever listened to any of his interviews, he is the most intellectual motherfucker that you could listen to, talking about, the record labels being corporate bullshit, talking about, how all these politicians are terrible and they're trying to, censor things without actually understanding or knowing what it is. And then we've got, the fact that other artists like Henry Rollins has done, spoken word albums, which is basically just him, giving philosophy and intellectual discussion to himself. It's like people say that metal is for so many people that are just dumb and don't want to do anything, and yet you look at the actual artists and talk to them behind the scenes when they're not on stage, and so many of them are very, very, very intelligent. And if I would recommend any series of books for you to read, as far as to know just how intelligent, though crass, a musician could be, read anything that Corey Taylor has written, the lead singer of Slipknot and Stone Sour. That dude has some serious, facts of life, sins aren't sins, religion is just fucking hypocrisy, with examples type of stuff. It's just great.
Well, also, I was going to say, since you brought up Dee Snider, there's also when he testified before Congress against the PMRC.
Yep. I remember that.
I was, what was that, 88? I was 2 years old.
Is the PMRC.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
The
I was 21.
PMRC was an organization started by Tipper Gore. It was basically parents and mothers against metal.
Oh, yeah. I remember that fiasco.
You know what's funny? If Yang were actually president, I'd say
Tipper Gore had her ass in an uproar because she thought, that Gen X and the rest of the, back when my generation was the youth, that, we were just being corrupted by the likes of Twisted Sister and AC/DC and,
Yeah, she was particularly horrified by Prince.
Yeah.
Ariel, you have the floor.
Oh, I was saying, if we actually had a Yang presidency and a UBI, I'd say, I'm as happy as heaven, and please just keep giving me more.
Give me money! I will spend it, and boom, the damn economy.
No, the funny thing is there is an antidote to this virus. There's a cure, but we keep ignoring it or downplaying it because people are fucking stupid. That's all I
see.
have to
Angelo has arrived. Welcome, Angelo. You're just a little bit late, but it's okay.
Oh, I've been here since the start of the show.
Have you been? You weren't here when I was trying to do the introduction, so I did not. You've been so quiet. You have not said much. Is there anything you wanted to say?
No, not really. Just kind of listening today.
Cool. Okay, well, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. I really thought you had just arrived. I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to say anything you'd wanted to say before the show concludes, which is going to be in about 15 minutes. So, all right, sorry for interrupting. Let's move on to whatever.
I know that a lot of people are not going to be watching the Twitch. They're just going to be listening. So I wanted to read that little bit of that speech. I just think it's so amazing. It's not going to be in Mario Savio's voice, but, he says, there's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. And I think that's really good for our today, solidarity with labor today, and keeping with that general strike.
I mean, I took part of my little break to go get the mail and also to call my representatives because dealing with someone who is as neoliberal as our mutual acquaintance, Steve-O, it infuriates me that people think that just because Biden has cleared the air about the sexual assault things makes him instantly a good candidate. It does not. His policies are still shit. That has nothing to do with his policies. He's still not actually been investigated for it either. He just said that there was nothing that happened. And you know who else said that nothing ever happened? Bill fucking Clinton. And we found that was false too. So, but I called my representatives because right now Congress is on recess. Why? Because they're fucking lazy. They said that they need to do shit. They were up until 3 in the goddamn morning passing trillions of dollars of relief for corporations and Wall Street. But when they fucking have 2 minutes to goddamn think about the people who vote them into office, they go on goddamn hiatus and seclusion back to their goddamn homes when they're like, oh, there's a pandemic, I can't vote, I'll be putting myself at risk. That's your fucking job, And so I, cleaned up my language, but I did call all of my representatives, my congressional representative and both senators for Montana, and I told them that they're not doing their jobs, that 5,000 lives have been lost in the last couple of days that they have been on recess, and that blood is on their hands, and I demanded that they vote for $2,000 a month UBI until this is over. This is like the frickin' 4th or 5th or 6th week in a row that I have called them at least once, if not twice a week, demanding fucking UBI, because these people are so stupid. They're like, reopen the economy, give unemployment benefits. It's like, what about the people who don't qualify? What about the people who are working 3 part-time jobs because no one will hire them full-time because they're cutting fucking costs and trying to, keep people from having benefits? Because if you hire someone full-time, you have to have benefits. That's the worst thing about fucking the bullshit conservatives put in to the Obamacare legislation that they the Dems allowed to fucking go, was the stupid requirement for employers to have insurance and shit. So that made it so that then, because the insurance from employers was basically a forced option, people had to go with their employer's insurance. And then the employers were like, no, we don't want to pay your insurance, so you're not going to get enough hours to get insurance. It's just a bunch of bullshit. Neoliberal bullshit.
Yeah, we all can agree on that.
And that's why we cannot vote for Joe Biden under any circumstances. Everybody tell everybody.
Well, what we can do, I think, if we want to be smart and strategic about this, that Trumper for Yang guy, we should just get more conservatives to, like we kind of got it on the Democrat side, and Tim Ryan is, talking about it, but then when Nancy Pelosi just made a peep about it, people like Numbskullice and all of his friends went crazy and went like, no, we can't do that. So we can get more like the Trumper for Yang, and people like Fred the Felon lean a little more libertarian, conservative. We can try to get more of them on board, and we can.
We got Dan.
Right, exactly. We just need to get more. We just need to make the case to more of those people, because I think we got a good amount of weight on the Democrat side.
When you look at economics,
that?
Yeah, I was going to say, the Democrats, I think the left as a whole is so fractured and looking for purity tests that I think that statement needs a reevaluation.
I'd agree with Sheridan on that. I would definitely agree with Sheridan on that.
The problem I see right now is that didn't Andrew Yang just sue the state of New York for not holding an election, like a primary election, because basically everybody has dropped out of the presidential race, and so you've got only one choice.
Well, there's also down ballot primaries.
Yes, that's true, but their given reasoning is that why are we endangering people to go out to vote and doing all this work when there really isn't a choice on the particular issue anymore?
Mail-in ballots.
Right. I think also a situation with the primary in New York is they didn't cancel. Excuse me. They didn't cancel the other primaries. They only canceled the presidential one. So when they're claiming that they're doing it and for people's health, well, frankly, that's fucking bullshit.
Why? Well,
if they were so concerned about people's health, then why the fuck didn't they pass the UBI and counter these, idiots who are demanding we reopen the economy with, okay, let's get automation fully up to speed so that the economy can be reopened, but without relying as much on human labor, and let's focus more on, letting people participate, having people participate in the economy as consumers, as small business owners, and as investors and as traders. This idea that people have to sweat, work for an employer, or else, doesn't matter if they can't or if they're disabled or if it's just not freaking practical for a myriad of reasons, that they should just be left to starve and die, is bullshit. And that whole ideology comes back to people who point to their Bibles and point to 2 Thessalonians verse, 3:10, those who don't work shall not eat.
Well, it also has a more modern iteration.
But that was also in the context of the Malthusian trap. Back when the Bible was written, you had to work to feed yourself. Now we have machines producing so much more food, only 2% of people in the entire American Federation calls themselves farmers.
Yep. But yet we have this idea that the majority of people seem to be okay with, and it's like I said earlier, first they said they had no desire to hurt the, quote, deserving poor, but then they soon decided that no one who was poor was deserving. And that's where this entire destructive, I'm not even going to say counterproductive, it's just outright destructive blowback is coming from, and opposition to UBI is coming from, even though UBI is really the most sensible, sane solution, to these problems that we're facing. And we know this.
I got a couple words for you. Tea Party, Ayn Rand, and Atlas Shrugged.
Oh, man.
That is basically the exact reason why a lot of these people went from saying, oh, we don't want to hurt the deserving poor, to no poor is deserving. Because that very far right ideology of Ayn Rand has seeped into the Republican Party over the last 40 years, slowly but surely. And not only that, because of how hard it has been seeping into them and into the lobbyists and the corporatists, it's also seeped into the DNC and become just this festering bullshit of pull yourself up by your bootstraps or you're fucked. And it's bullcrap because, my grandmother is over 70 years old. She works part-time at Walmart because, well, she'd be bored as shit if she was at home, for one. And for two, she doesn't get enough from her Social Security from working since she was 17 years old at many factories in my hometown to actually pull in a decent livable wage. And then my mother is working at Home Depot, which is also open. No one's wearing masks. They don't have any sort of PPE protection for any of the employees. And she's basically had chronic bronchitis that might be related to COVID since February because they tested her for flu and it was negative. But they don't have any COVID tests in my home county where I come from in Minnesota. There's no tests. There's no testing. The only people who can get them is hospital workers. Either.
Well, there's also, into what you're saying, Disdonn, there's also the additional thing that the talk about poverty and the problems that of shifting the blame for poverty squarely onto the shoulders of the poor has been racialized, and even people who think themselves to be progressive who really are not are saying shit like on the slate that there's no excuse for any white person in America to be poor. The system was designed to prop them up.
Bullshit.
Yeah. Now, this is the kind of bullshit that I've been calling out. I was slugging it out on Slate yesterday, as a matter of fact, and dressed this guy down publicly. And I said, if you want to see Trump get reelected again by a landslide, please continue repeating your verbal sewage, because you're going to piss off and alienate, all the people living below poverty that are literally struggling for their fucking lives, who are sick and tired of being told that, they're privileged. This is not conducive to progress.
So
This
we were
is not-
talking in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and this far right perspective is akin to eugenics. It's economic Darwinism, and it will become a filter for our species if we allow it, because the poor are just regular people, and they have a broad array of innate traits that they have been able to evolve with to this point. And if you exile them, we may select out something that our entire species needs in the next 50 years.
I mean, I come from a family of working poor. My great-grandmother and great-grandfather were, married around World War II. Both grew up in the Depression, during the Depression in Nebraska. Both were, sharecroppers. They helped farmers during the Dust Bowl and stuff like that. And the thing with all of that is that, that work ethic, that, agrarian society, they moved to Minnesota because of, cost of living, the fact that there was more opportunities, etc. And they moved to Minnesota. It was around the time my mother was born, so that would have been 1966. And so, like, they were in Minnesota, and when they were doing that stuff, they were still poor. I mean, they had to switch from being farmers to being, retail workers and working in factories. And a lot of the factories that my family's worked in Minnesota have either folded and been shipped overseas during the 80s and 90s, or they slowly started getting rid of any and all benefits for their workers. My grandmother worked for 15 years for a factory in my hometown called Northern Contours that makes particle board, furniture, particle board, shelving, doors. And, she worked for them for 15 years, 40 hours a week on the evening shift from like 2 p.m. to like 2 a.m., 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week. I mean, she made decent money, but the thing is that they slowly started taking away all of her benefits, her insurance, her paid leave time, because they kept, trying to cut costs and increase profits, increase profits. And then eventually she just fucking quit. And since then, she's been bouncing between what few retail stores are left in that town since, Walmart exists, and has been driving everywhere else out of town, and the other places have slowly gone the way of, Kmart and just closed up shop. So it's like, it's not that my family's been trying to be poor. It's that they just, have been getting fucked by their places of employment so hard over the past, 30 years. And they're so loyal to their employers that it's like, no, they didn't ask to be, poor or barely above poverty line, but that's the way it is.
That's how it was for my husband's family as well, Disdonn. My husband's family, same thing. He came from rural generational poverty. And it was the same thing. And a lot of people don't realize, that, we've always had, poverty in this country where people, and it, to say that it was just along racial lines, is that's what is used to often deliberately derail any honest conversation about poverty.
The other thing that they use to derail is the fact that they try and say that everybody who's on welfare or food stamps is a drug addict.
Yes.
Well, so we have identified one of the serious problems here is that we spend a lot of time arguing between the employers and the employees. We've got the unions fighting the big corporate interests and stuff. But actually what we need to do is realize that everybody is playing their part in the economic system that we have created and that we keep supporting by saying capitalism is the best of the best of the best. And so if we just what we need to do is look at the regulatory environment, right, that controls all of these interactions and create new systems that actually work for people and stop labeling things. You know, we're going to label this far right. We're going to label this far left. Then we're going to label this socialism. And then we're going to label this, you know, labels are what divide us. What we need to do is take a look at those problems, like Ariel says, take a look at the problem and actually fix the problem, find the solution, engineer that solution.
Well, I think the solution that you're... Sorry, what?
Oh, I was just saying it's 12, so we're at time. But yeah, go on, Sheridan.
What you were mentioning, Faye, I think could be simplified to the overall economy orientation with the American scorecard. If we had those measurements that people actually could connect to, and more importantly, when we put tax incentives for businesses to capture, we will really start to see the changes you're talking about, regardless of the regulatory framework that we currently have.
Exactly, and the politicians are happy when they keep us fighting each other, you know, the employee, when in fact our interests should be aligned, right? If our business does well, we should do better, and vice versa. But it's not aligned because of the corporate problems. Not the corporate problems, but the regulatory problems that we've created.
We've created a lot more than just that as far as problems. I mean, we've got a lot of shit to unpack from our collective knapsack.
That's true, and this whole the presidential primary being canceled over in New York is not the only primary that's been canceled. A lot of Republican primaries were canceled because, you know, there's nobody else going but Trump, and we know it. You know, the other people are just there for show. Like, we have an alternative that you could vote, but nobody's going to vote for you. So,
yeah, that was huge news. Like, in late 2018, that all the southern states just canceled, the Republican parties of those states just canceled their primary and nominated Trump.
Yeah, even though there was like one or two people who came out as, you know, trying to oppose Trump and trying to be the nominee instead of him because they realized just how bad he was for the Republican Party.
yeah, well, the thing is, if they cancel all of these primaries, we've already had a situation in 2016 where they took it all up to court, and the court said, hey, the original party system was the parties get to decide. They could literally be in the smoky back room making their backroom deals, and nobody's going to say boo about it because the party decides who gets to go. Just like in a private corporation, you know, they can almost have unlimited powers of who they're going to fire and who they're going to hire, and they can always.
Do you know why
that's
that is,
why it's
Faye?
very difficult. Yeah.
Do you know why that is, Faye?
No, please tell me.
We were talking with what was it, Trevor or Trey? Somebody who hasn't been on in a while. When I was still on the Tuesday, when we still did
Travis?
Tuesdays. Yeah, Travis. There we go. I knew it was a T. Sorry, but Travis said that no, it's not because of anything political. The reason is because the DNC and the GOP are not government entities; they are corporations.
So that's why they're treated the same way corporations are. They can decide who to put up there, and all of this has been just a show. You know, so it's really a show.
And we should be able to sue them for, you know, being disingenuous about their actual, like, credibility as an entity, because they are not a government body. They are just a corporation of people funneling money into elections and into campaigns and ads. That's all that they are.
Suing the DNC isn't going to be very likely, but what you likely could do is sue states for allocating the Electoral College votes to these private corporations.
I mean, that definitely would be
when
possible.
You talk about these things,
that would be something to seriously pursue, I think.
But listen to the way that we're talking about it. We're saying, okay, first of all, people don't know what our democracy consists of. So we have the idea that our vote means something when it doesn't really mean think. It's, you know, under the aegis.
The way that the Electoral College works is only on the presidential level, Every other office is by first past the post direct voting of the constituents. When we talk about this, that your vote doesn't matter, it's only in terms of the presidency because of the way our system is built. Just for
About the
listening
Electoral
audience.
College, because I actually like that. I like the Electoral College, and the reason is it was built to make it so that minority states and states that are very rural would have a significant voice, and that's how we built that system. What I'm talking about is the fact that we don't choose who is running for president. And so a lot of people are very dissatisfied with the choices that we have right now, and we can't seem to do anything about it. That is exactly the reason that Hong Kong went to protest. They said, well, Chinese party is deciding who we can choose. So we have the same system here. The parties decide who we can choose from. We don't get to decide who, the primary is not a real thing. It's almost like I had to discover this through a whole year of working with, this Andrew Yang campaign. But a lot of other people have discovered it through Bernie's campaign or through working with Warren's campaign. And we're all coming to that realization now. Wow, well, our candidates are not going to be in the running. And they have chosen this person from the beginning. And we all knew who it was chosen, right? And
not only that,
they can make sure he gets that nomination.
With the Electoral College, we should have it in place, but it needs to be adjusted. I love Andrew Yang's idea of making it proportional to that state's popular vote, because some states actually do have Electoral College initiatives where their popular vote will be where all of their Electoral College votes go towards.
Isn't
like
that too
California.
late if we're told which people are going to be on that ballot, as in the New York State situation, or in a lot of these other presidential primaries that were canceled? It's too late.
I completely agree. We need to give citizens cash to actually pay for their candidate to make it through the mess that we currently have.
A lot of those policies are not even big enough, Like Andrew Yang says, voting is kind of a big deal in this tweet. But see, now once again, he's putting that back on just the voting. What about choosing the candidates that you can vote for? How do those candidates get on the ballot in the first place? And then how do they get taken off before you can even vote for them?
It's a mystery.
It shouldn't be that big of a mystery for us, but, honestly, I've worked with Burke Anderson's campaign a little bit, and I've seen how difficult it is for people to get on the ballot, right? You have to collect those signatures in some states, and others, everything is different in every state, and you have to pay fees, and so that really precludes a lot of people from making a run at all.
I remember when I ran for mayor in my hometown, I had to pay over $100 in fees, and I had to do all the campaigning myself, et cetera, and it was pretty rough. And that was just for like a mayoral campaign. So, I mean, it's terrible.
Well, mayors don't get paid anything. So to do that and then have a kind of no, not true?
Mayors do get paid. Depending on the city, city council gets to decide what the mayoral salary is. And in my hometown, that salary was like $1,200 a month.
Okay, but I actually know of cities where it's not a paid position. That's the thing, is you have to look around the whole country. It's hard to do that from one place. You have to ask around, and there are small towns where the mayor is not even a paid position. It's like a volunteer.
Oh, yeah. I'm probably living in one of those right now.
It's 10 minutes after 12. Do we want to give our sign-offs here and wrap it up and see some of you guys tomorrow at the Big Open discussion? The Big Open moderated discussion?
How do we get into that? Are we still invited to that?
Did you say $1,200 a month? I just want to make sure that mayor.
Yeah, $1,200 a month. The town was 13,000 people, though.
Oh, okay. That's all I wanted to see. Okay, thanks.
The open discussion, yeah, of course you're still invited to the open discussion. That is the private Zoom meeting with the private Zoom call with Ojeda and Broiler is not the moderated discussion. That's a different thing.
Okay, so we will find that Zoom link tomorrow.
That's on Sunday. Isn't it?
No, it's on Saturday.
Oh, it's on Saturday. Oh, my bad.
No, I mean it'll be broadcast on Twitch.
So but we're not going to come in. We're not going to jump into Discord like we're doing right now. We're going to find a Zoom link somewhere.
No, there's no
Twitch
Zoom
link.
link to find. It's not. It's just 4 people. It's just me, Jeremy, Ojeda, and Broiler on Saturday.
Okay, so we'll be watching you or listening to you.
Yeah, you can. It'll be live on Twitch. But before that, earlier in the day, we have the moderated discussion tomorrow. So.
And that's at the normal time?
Yeah, that is. Let me just bring up the schedule. Saturday 3 to 5 is the open roundtable. And Jeremy, what time is the Ojeda interview?
The Ojeda interview is scheduled for 3 o'clock.
Okay, it's 3 to 5. All right, so I meant to move the roundtable up. All right, sorry, I got confused with what week that was. Oh man, all right. So I thought that the 3 to 5 interview was next week. All right, so I guess we're not going to do the open roundtable 3 to 5 tomorrow. I don't know. Do we want to do it earlier or later?
I'm down to do 1 to 3.
That works for me. All right. Yeah. So I'll be in the Discord. Does 1 to 3 work for you, Jeremy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
We'll do
I
it then.
think we should probably have like a little bit of time dedicated to for setup and make sure our Zoom stuff is all worked out. So
Actually, we should probably do it earlier. Why don't we do it like noon?
There's something I'd like you guys to bring up to the attention when you and Jeremy do your thing tomorrow with Mike Breuer and.
Well, you could submit a question. I mean, we have a whole list of questions. But yeah, I mean, say it now, please. But I mean, did you know that we've been asking people to submit questions? I don't know if that came through.
No, I'm scrolling up here trying to find it because it's hard for me to keep on top.
Oh, it was on the Twitter one.
It's hard for me too. It's okay. So, what's your question? We'll ask him.
Well, the question I have is, holding, what are they planning to do to obviate, a problem like what we have right now, where that I brought up in the very beginning of today, where we've got this boondoggle with, people that, are disabled, they're shut in, they're elderly, rural poor, they don't have a car, they're sitting on food stamps that they can't use to buy food, and that this was considered helpful. And it was a measure that cost a good chunk of change for Congress to pass, only to end up not really helping. Because this is kind of serious, and I'd like to see something like that addressed. I'd like to see that addressed.
Oh yeah, that's kind of a central point of both of their campaigns. Was bridging the gap between income inequality, and I mean Ojeda has an excellent history of being a champion for the underrepresented, the impoverished, and the blue collar working class.
Yeah, I mean because it's like I said at the beginning of this thing. This is why something like SNAP, instead of just giving people money, is not helpful and can be downright destructive. Because when you have people that cannot, especially during this current situation with the COVID crisis, that they cannot get into the stores, they can't go to the stores, they're not able to buy food. What good are food stamps if you cannot use them for their intended purpose? It's pointless.
Well, that actually is kind of leading into another topic that we actually are going to talk about in the moderated discussion about our food supply.
That's right. So I will see, hopefully, most of you back tomorrow, 12. Let's try 12 to we'll try to get it done before 1:30. We might not have time for much of an open discussion, but we'll do the moderated discussion at noon tomorrow. Actually, you guys can probably kick around, and keep talking while we set up the Zoom, and we'll switch over to the feed to that at some point. So I will see you guys tomorrow. If you guys want to real quick just sign off, give your Twitter, and say goodbye. Starting with you, Angelo.
I am Angelo Mendoza. Twitter at Hellion Hellfire.
Thank you.
Ariel. My Twitter is Ariel's _Armada, and you can find me on YouTube as Revolution.
Don.
Disdonn, aka Disdonn Plays, at Disdonn Plays. It's DISDONN Plays. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Yeah.
Thank you, Don. And I think before I forget, I want to have, regarding the Steve-O thing, I want to invite Steve-O to come on. I don't know if he'll come on. But I want to invite him to come on and pitch everybody on why they should vote for Biden on Saturday the 9th. Maybe
I think that'd be a
before or after we have our guest. Actually, no, I think we have our guest Friday that week. So Saturday we've got.
The only reason
open.
he's been able to really give me is not Trump.
Yeah. Well, I'll invite somebody else then. We'll have a debate on Saturday the 9th. Why should I vote for Joe Biden? So we'll invite some people who believe we should. It will be lively, I think. Faye.
Hi, I'm at Palestine Math, and I would like to invite you all to the Game 2020 Slack, which is changing to Humanity First Movement, and they are doing a lot of Yang Gang hangs. I think you can find them through Humanity Forward right now, because I saw a lot of people join from that. And I think our next one is going to be next Tuesday. So if you're free then, please come join us and meet more people who are interested in problem solving.
I really should do that.
Next one's actually today.
There's today?
Oh, that's true. There's one today. But, in case you weren't geared up and you don't get to hear the podcast until after today, I would come to the one on Tuesday.
I should really meet some people there. I really should. I haven't been to one yet. Either today or Tuesday. I really should.
Is this that hangout on Slack, a Yang Gang virtual hangout?
Yeah.
Yep. Hosted by Humanity Forward. I'm actually going to be one of the hosts today. It's
Nice.
at 12:45 to 2:30 Eastern Time.
Can you send me a link? Because I have not seen that, and I was having difficulty finding different things on Slack throughout the channel structure there.
And Angelo, let us know how that goes tomorrow.
Angelo, I would like to invite you again to come on that Yang Gang report live to teach people how to onboard themselves to the Slack stuff.
Oh, certainly.
And if we could find one other person, maybe Brendan Carpenter or somebody else, who maybe Gray, who has also suggested he might come, that would be great. We can have a couple of people.
All right.
Yeah, I can talk to Brendan later today about it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Jacqueline, you want to give your Twitter one more time?
I'm Jacqueline, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jacqueline Homan. And I also have a very sparse YouTube channel, Jacqueline Homan. You can follow me on Quora, Medium, Facebook. I get all.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Jeremy.
Thanks to everybody for tuning in today. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at Jeremy Sammons1, and that's SAMMONS and the number 1.
And Sheridan.
Thank you, Shael. I'm Sheridan. You can find me on Twitter at JSaberGamer, JSABERGAMER.
Thank you, Sheridan. And I am SHAELRILEY, Shael Riley on Twitter. Thank you for tuning in. Tune in again tomorrow. We're going to have Twitch content tomorrow from noon to about 5. So hopefully I'll see you then. Take care of yourselves. Take care of everybody you can. And be safe.